So, what happens when you know that you're with the right person, but what you may not know is that it's not the right time? Or maybe you do know it's not the right time, but either way, right person, wrong time. So, clearly, it's not a compatibility issue, it is a timing issue. And of course, astrology always has the answers to everything, particularly timing. Now, when we're talking about compatibility, we're talking about synastry. So, as I've mentioned in this series earlier, it's about comparing your chart with your partner's chart to see how those charts interplay. And so you can assess your compatibility. And remember, compatibility isn't a black and white thing. It's not like, okay, you've got your sun in Aries, I have my sun in Gemini. Are we compatible or not? There's varying shades of gray, right? However, when we talk about timing, we're talking about transits, and these would be transits to your natal chart. So, if you're new around here or you're new to astrology, transits are when you compare what's currently going on in the sky to your natal chart. And your natal chart can become activated via transits. So, your natal chart is a snapshot of the cosmos the moment that you were born. And there's lots going on in your natal chart, but not everything is always going on at the same time. And certain things become more prominent when they are being activated via transit. So, for instance, if you have a Gemini stellium, meaning that you've got three or more planets in Gemini in your natal chart, you know, and let's say that Gemini is your second house of money. Money issues will always be very prevalent for you during Gemini season when the sun is going through your second house. And when it's going through your second house, it's going to be activating all of those planets in your second house of Gemini. So those planets become activated by transit. Now, in the realm of relationships, transits become really important because you could be with the right person, but it's just not the right time for certain things. The thing that I love about astrology is that it gives us like a timetable for things. Wherever the sun is kind of what we are focusing on. Just like there's seasonal fruit, at least there should be, right? Because not every fruit is meant to bloom and ripen at the same time. Certain areas of your life are more of a focus at certain times as opposed to others. So you can view timing in terms of seasons, right? So even if you're with the right person, it may not be the time to focus on the relationship. So for instance, your seventh house is Libra. So every Libra season, your relationship literally comes into focus, not just because Libra is the relationship sign, but for you, Libra is your seventh house of relationships. And so it follows that every Libra season, something happens in your relationship. You get in one, you break up, something's always happening concerning relationships. Now, where this becomes an issue is when we start having expectations. So, for instance, you've been with someone for a long time and you are expecting to get engaged. And you're wondering, when is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? Astrology can tell you when, even if it is going to be a surprise. Now, it can predict it down to the day, or it could just tell you sort of a general time frame in which it would happen, right? But you could look at that via transits. And that's kind of a fun thing to do. If you really want to know, if you really want to be nosy and you kind of want to get ahead of things, you can do that. But we don't even look at it, you can look at it from varying uh vantage points, right? You could look at it based off the sun, right? Wherever the sun is, that's the part of your natal chart that's going to be activated. But you could also look at it in terms of things like retrogrades, in terms of things like eclipses. If you're experiencing an eclipse in a relationship house, or if the eclipse is, activating the ruler of any of your relationship houses, you're going to experience something having to do with your relationships in a direct sort of way. Let's say that. But what becomes really interesting is when we start looking at the outer planets, planets like Jupiter, Saturn is a really big one. When you have a Saturn transit that affects your relationships, these are the kind of transits that people typically remember. Okay. Or when you have, a transit having to do with Neptune, Uranus, or even Pluto. Those stand out because they don't move as quickly. And like in the case of Saturn, you could have a transit that lasts like 3 years. So let's say you've got Aries as your seventh house. So let's say that you are a Libra rising. Saturn is about to enter your seventh house for the next 3 years. And this is going to begin in a couple of months at the time that I'm recording this video. So, with Saturn entering your seventh house, timing is going to be an issue, whether you are coupled or not. Number one, because your seventh house, Aries, is your house of relationships. And number two, Saturn is the planet of time. So, what could this look like? This could look like a relationship that was really moving, especially because you've got Aries as your seventh house, it may really slow down. So whereas y'all were, getting to know each other, meeting the family, doing all the things in succession, now all of a sudden there's delays. Things are taking a lot longer. There could be issues where now it's difficult for you to meet the family, maybe because of a distance thing. Or maybe now that you guys are getting serious, one of you has to move for work. And it's putting a wedge in the relationship, or it is bringing difficulty to your relationship. And this is significant because a Saturn transit lasts 2.5 to 3 years. Now, it doesn't mean that for that entire time you're going to be going through the depths of hell, but your relationship is going to not only be a focus, but there may be obstacles, hardships, and challenges happening within that 2.5 to 3 year period. And Saturn helps you grow up, Saturn helps you mature. And when you experience a Saturn transit as it relates to your relationships, this is when your relationship is kind of tested. And I put tested in quotes because I don't think the universe tests us. I think that the universe gives us situations to build character and strength. And in the realm of relationships, when Saturn comes into your seventh house, for instance, those hardships help solidify your relationship. Think of it this way: if y'all lived in the same apartment building or y'all lived together and you started your relationship, and now one of you has to move halfway around the world, and you're still able to maintain that relationship. You know how much stronger that relationship is because now you're not seeing each other every day? Like, that's just one example of how this can play out, but that's how Saturn works. And so timing becomes a thing. Having to wait, having to be patient. And we don't always like that in relationships, especially if we create a timetable for ourselves or for the relationship. Especially if you're at that point where it's like, are we going to be exclusive? Are we going to get engaged? Are we going to move in together? Right? Those really big milestones in relationships often get derailed or often change when a planet like Saturn comes in the mix, right? Enters the chat. And so you may think, okay, all these signs mean that we're not supposed to be together. All of these challenges mean the relationship is not going to work. Could that be the case? It could be, depending on what your synastry looks like. But if you're talking about timing, this could be your person. This could be the relationship for you. It's just a matter of timing. Now let's take it a little further. Let's say that you have like a Neptune transit. Let's say Neptune is transiting one of your relationship houses, like it's going through one of your relationship houses. That takes 14 years. And it's not to say that, well, let's talk about the nature of Neptune, period. Neptune is idealism. Neptune is fantasy. Neptune is rose-colored glasses, right? This could have you on a high when it comes to relationships. This could have you experiencing relationships from a higher level, experiencing love and romance specifically because those fall under the realm of Neptune, experiencing those in relationships a lot more, or that becomes a focus for you over those 14 years. It could be the universe's way of getting you prepared for a relationship. In the case of, let's say that you are in, let's say, your early 20s and you are experiencing Neptune going through your seventh house. You may be like 21 or 22 and you're experiencing Neptune going through your seventh house. What's going to happen over the next 14 years? It's not to say that you wouldn't get married or you wouldn't get into a committed relationship. You can kind of look at it as the universe kind of prepping you for when you do, because as Neptune goes through your seventh house, you're going to vacillate between seeing relationships in an ideal sort of way, like with rose-colored glasses on, like wanting to be married and wanting to be booed up and seeing the good side of relationships, especially when Neptune is direct. And then when Neptune goes retrograde, the universe gives you a glimpse of the real side of relationships. What relationships are like when you take off the rose colored glasses or when you take off the beer goggles. And you're going to go through this fantasy and reality dance in your relationship house for about 14 years. And so let's say Neptune enters your seventh house and you're 21. By the time you get to 35, you've sufficiently understood, or at least one would hope, what the reality of relationships are, but also what they could be, the idealism of it. So now, when you enter into a relationship in your 30s and you're looking to get into a serious relationship or you're looking to get married, you kind of understand what it could be, but also what it is. It's like the universe has prepped you in that way. Now, that's just a very specific example. Maybe you're already in a relationship when you're experiencing a Neptune transit. The same sort of thing could happen, but as it pertains to an existing relationship. You see the good side, you see the bad side, you see what it could be, and you see what it is. And when Neptune finally leaves your relationship house, your relationship is either on a whole new level, it's reached a whole new height, or maybe you're not even in that relationship anymore because the dance of illusion and fantasy and reality made you realize that this is not my person. So you see how timing can affect your romantic life and your romantic story. Like, to recap, it could be a situation where wherever the sun is going is what activates your relationship houses, or the planets that directly speak to your relationship houses. So, if you've got Libra as your seventh house, every Libra season, relationships are front and center. And whether they're reciprocal, whether they're beautiful, right? Because relationships for you are always going to be seen through the lens of Libra. But then we have more abstract timing, longer periods of time that teach you profound things, that teach you lessons in timing or lessons in fantasy and reality. Now, Pluto is the slowest moving planet. It takes the longest time to orbit the sun. Some of us may not experience a Pluto transit when it comes to our relationship stories, but some of us may. For instance, if you are a Cancer rising, you had Pluto in your seventh house for what, 20 something years, I think, along those lines. 2008, I believe, is when Pluto first went into Capricorn. And then 2024 is when Pluto moved into Aquarius. So you guys had Pluto in your house of relationships for more than a decade. Let's just say that, because my math ain't mathing in my head right now. But that was intense. That showed you that was the death and rebirth of relationships, perhaps on a loop. Intensity, things coming up from the surface, almost like pet cemetery in a way. The structure, the very foundation of your relationships could have crumbled, and then they could have been built. Very intense. So not everyone experiences that, but if you did, if you experienced a Pluto transit in your relationship story, it likely changed your relationship story forever. That's the nature of Pluto. But either way, the purpose of this video was to explain how transits really affect your love life and how they can affect your love life. They can affect it on kind of a personal and mundane level with the sun, or they can teach you things over an extended period of time in the case of like a Saturn and a Neptune. Now, I did a series of videos on Venus and Saturn, Venus and Neptune, Venus and Pluto. So if you haven't checked those out, hit up the playlist and check those out to get the kind of more clinical and technical side of those things. But transits matter. Of course, transits matter. Everything in astrology matters, but it can really, transits really demonstrate, or they can demonstrate, right person, wrong time. So even if you're compatible with somebody, it may not be the time for this thing, whether this thing is taking the relationship to a new level or even getting into a relationship at all. Timing is a thing. And of course, astrology has the answer to that, and that would be transits. All right, my loves, that's pretty much all I've got for you for this video on transits and how they affect your love life. All right, so everything you need to know about everything is in the description box below. So check out everything there. Watch the rest of the videos in this series. If you haven't watched my story times yet, do that because they're really juicy and really interesting. At least I like to think. All right, my loves. So that's pretty much it. All right, thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you in my next video. Take care.